Hey everyone, in this episode we are going to be breaking down the cinematography of Ex Machina. Or Machina, or Machina. I just decided that I didn't know how to pronounce it, so I would definitely get it wrong to start, and then we would go from there. So, this movie was shot by Rob Hardy and directed by Alex Garland, who is known for, at least known to me, for movies like 28 Days Later. I see a lot of 28 Days Later in this movie, especially the red lighting, which was shot with the XL1. Throwback to the XL1 or XL2. I think it was the XL1. It was an old DV camera. Crazy. Film is still amazing. And he's also responsible for Sunshine, which I really like, but I also get mixed up in my head with Sunshine and Event Horizon. And Event Horizon is a very scary space movie, and it's one of the number one reasons that I don't watch scary movies anymore. Because they're scary. So we will get right into this breakdown after the intro. Cool. So, I don't know how to say it. Okay, whatever. Thank you. I'm gonna just slaughter names. That's how we're gonna do it. That's part of my shtick now. Is Revolutionary Nick, James Marin, Dude _ Eric, Fuse again. We are BTS TV. Eric, James again, Joe, and Nick again. You guys, you're consistent if nothing else. And now we're doing it. I will say that, like, in the original, when I first heard about this movie, no offense if the filmmakers are listening to this, you guys are amazing. I am no one. I just wasn't into it. I don't know. I'm not into, like, maybe it's the trailers, the way it was marketed, just hearing about it. I don't know. Maybe there's just something going on in my life. I just wasn't into it. But you guys picked it out. You called it out. It was a good call. This movie is beautiful. And I mean that on multiple levels, not just the photography. But we got to move quick because there's a lot of stuff we're going to go through. So Ex Machina. I'm just going to call it Machina. Diana, my wife, asked me, she's like, is that how you pronounce it? I was like, I don't really know. And I'm not going to Google it. So here we are. Good old scene 54. Slate? Take? Is that how they do it? What? I'm used to scene... Wait, isn't it like roll... I'm confused by this system. You guys are gonna have to hook me up on that. What's going on there? But director Alex Garland, DP Rob Hardy, 2013. It's the throwback. Is this camera B? I'm not used to this slate. What does this number 10 mean too? Is this a fake slate? This feels like a fake slate. We're moving on. So here is Alex, and they're looking at this skeleton of a robot. And right now we're just gonna go over some quick behind the scenes stuff about the movie. So shot with the F65. This is the Sony F6.5, the go-to camera of one of my favorite DPs who we have somehow not broken down any of his movies yet, Claudio Miranda. But we're talking about Rob Hardy on this one, no biggie. We'll let Claudio rock out on his own on another episode, but F65, they are soulmates in that. And what I will say about the F65 that I do buy is that it resolves very well. It has high resolution, especially for the time, and it also has a great color science. And the way that Rob described it is that when he shot film had an organic feeling, but then he used master primes to capture that in a clean way. So film was organic, master primes were clean. In this instance, in the world that we live in right now, and when they were shooting this, the F65 is clean. So he used organic or dirtier lenses. So it's always this balance between clean and organic, or clean and messy, fuzzy. He uses those kind of words in the interview that I watched. So again, film was fuzzy or organic. Master primes are sharp. For him, he wanted to have the camera be sharp and have the lenses be the organic fuzzy part. And we'll talk about the lenses in a bit. Here is Alex directing. Is that an LED? I don't know what that is. And here's him looking at the monitor. I just like shots like this. There's a lot going on that has nothing to do with cinematography, but I like this orange strap here. Very cool, with a speaker on the top of it, and this, road case with the monitor. Everything in the film industry is the traveling circus. You got to just, in a moment's notice, put everything in a box, strap a speaker on the top, and then move on. It's like that. And I think this illustrates that. So I always have a little bit of nostalgia looking at this stuff. So here's a close-up of the X65 with the script crossfaded over it. I didn't take a great still, I guess. But F65, if you didn't know, now you know. It's cool. It looks like the Panavision Genesis a lot, and it even has, like, I think is that the recorder? It looks like a mag. It's like, they were It looks like a Panavision XL2 or Millennium XL2, one of those cameras. It's cool. I like it. So the lenses are Cooke. This is not the best. X-Tall. I believe this is what it is. Express. Yeah. So they are essentially, I believe, 1930s spherical lenses that were rehoused in the 80s to be anamorphic. And rehoused likely means they just have a front element in front of them that has a 2x squeeze, kind of like the Ice-Goramas, which I used to own, but a friend of mine has it right now. So these are very interesting anamorphic lenses. They were built by hand. I believe Joe Dunton was the guy that put them together. And they have a really interesting look. And the thing that Rob really liked about them, again, is that they have character and that each focal length and each lens per serial number is different. So if you had a 50 Cooke X-Tall Express, another 50 from the same series would look very different. They all have different characteristics. And then he would basically choose not only the field of view, the lens width, which is the primary reason you're going to choose a focal length over another one, but each lens also had its own flare characteristics. And we'll look at those a little bit as we move through this. Here, we're wrapping up this little intro section. Here's Rob with the 75mm Cooke. I don't know the focal lengths. I meant to look them up so I would know. And then here's the same camera, Rob again over here with the lenses. So next we're moving on to pre-pro. So Alex is a writer-director, and that's just amazing. Just like Nolan, he writes it, he directs it, he edits it, he sees it beforehand. So this is actually one of his drawings in pre-pro. So previs and pre-pro for him takes place in Sharpie world. I think he uses a Sharpie, which I think is, you'll kind of see in the movie later, his love of hand-drawn things. I'll try to remember to call that out. So this is his previs process, and it's a lot of the conceptualization of the look and how the model is going to be in the color palette to some degree. So it's really powerful when the director can create visuals to communicate what's in their head and what they see, to communicate to their DP, their art director, the VFX, everyone. It's so important that the director can do this, but not everyone can draw. So what do directors do that can't draw? Well, maybe we'll talk about that too later, maybe at the break. So here's some more beautiful stills. I think we all remember this shot. We'll definitely go over it, the actual shot of it, but it's beautiful. It shows the lighting. I can actually draw fairly well in this style. It's called two-tone. So the lighting, you don't have to worry about drawing gradation and blurring these lines. You literally just draw the core shadow, and it shows where the light is. And it's the fact that the blacks there's no true black. It's this light blue. It would basically imply that there's an ambient daylight source in the room that would be making everything blue, and then a warmer sunlight over this. It's beautiful. I know a lot of French illustrators that actually, not a lot, I know one French illustrator that draws like this, and I've pretty much copied his style whenever I'm doing 2D storyboards in Photoshop, which is this program, which a lot of people ask about. Here's another style still. This is not from Alex, I believe. I forget the name of the concept artist, but, it shows the robot Ava walking out of a bright scene into a dark hallway with some reflective surfaces implied. So a lot of stuff can be shown in pre-production. And then it's the director's job to get like the overall concept, and I think the feeling needs to be communicated. And this is something the production designer then does a render like this. And a lot of the times they'll go as far as to do this in 3D, which I think is a very good idea, especially as you're going to construct the set, and then the DP can then look at it in previs. All good stuff. But these are the next step from that. They would take the feeling, these kind of like mood drawings, and then turn them into actual renders of an actual set of what it might look like. So this is like implying a round room. There's this array of closets that have silhouette figures in them. And then there's nature stuff. There's trees in it. And this kind of does imply concrete to me. And there's this chair. It's kind of this interesting, like he would be sitting here while she's like standing there with a bed. I think we all know what that's about. And then here's another drawing of Nathan's study. So pretty cool. It even has the round room with the panels, has the sticky notes, and his triple monitor setup. I don't know about this bookcase. I don't think that made it. But this is and a skylight. This is the process, the iteration from script to mood board to architectural rendering. And we're going to take it one step further in the brick. I think we all knew that was coming. And then here's kind of like a conceptual look at what the architectural, this is called an elevation view in architecture. We use it in 3D as well. It's basically connecting, like, how does this whole a house on top of a mountain and then this underground testing facility. How does this all actually look together? You know, this is supposed to be the richest man in the world, essentially. And what does his house look like? We'll go on to see that, you know, this part of the set was actually a hotel in, I'm not going to say the country. I forget where it was, somewhere in Europe. And then this down here was a stage build. But they want to have an idea of like, what would it look like if it was real? This kind of illustrates this to everybody, that this is like a subterranean facility. But up here is this really beautiful nature-esque place. So that's the pre-pro. I think it's really important. And of course, it does feed into what we're going to look at during the break. So let's get right into this. I'm going to try to fly through. So here's the first time we meet our main character, and they talk about finding this color corrector. This is a very affected color correction here. So the highlights here are very being, they were white. Essentially, they were probably this. And they've been tinted and controlled to be toned down and then tinted very blue. And the effect feels very like electronic, I think. It feels like the floor is made out of electricity to me. That's kind of what I feel here. These white monitors are kind of interesting, but what's really important is that we're meeting our main character. I won't go too much into the set design. And here's a very interesting point of view, and I don't know if this is the cook. I think it is. I feel like this is probably, like, most anamorphics don't typically go wider than 35, because that means that an anamorphic lens, if it's 2:1 essentially, so a 2:1 anamorphic lens means that horizontally, like this way, if it's a 35, it's really like closer to like an 18 mil, that sort of thing. And then vertically, it's a 35. So that's why this has this distortion horizontally. I know this is a little bit hard to see if you've never worked with anamorphic lenses, but the reason this is distorted here is because this 35 mil, which I would guess this is around a 35, I don't know the Cooke X-Tall lenses that well, is that really it's an 18. An anamorphic, or older lenses, the optics, they couldn't get wider lenses that didn't distort, but he chose the distortion on purpose. So all that to say that this is kind of like a webcam looking shot, and it gives a little bit of an interesting feeling. It has a lot of flaring. This is called blooming in CG anyway, this bloom, this bleed of light over his cheek. That is called blooming. That's part of the reason they chose these lenses, and you'll see a lot of blooming. And the other part is this distortion. And in this part, it kind of is like, oh, it's like a wide webcam, but you'll see it used in other parts of the film as well. We need to go faster. So we're looking straight down here. He pulls out his phone. He's a programmer, and he's won some sort of prize. And here we foreshadow that this phone is like tracking him. And these tracking marks, actually I came from, funny enough, computer vision programming, CV is what it's called, is where you teach the computer how to read this. That's actually what I went to school for a tiny bit as a programmer, left that and moved into filmmaking, but I did some computer vision programming. And looking at these points of the mouth, the nose, and the eyes, those are what the computer needs as input to read emotion, so quote unquote. And that's foreshadowing to what they talk about later. So I thought that was cool. And then here's a shot of the webcam, which is like the big brother kind of like shot. It's like, oh no. Here's a quick BTS of this scene. Not like a tremendous amount to talk about here, but essentially a rather daylight looking scene as far as the lighting. Like this, I imagine, is all daylight, like a skylight up here, windows. Actually, these look like they were on set a little bit blue, so I might be wrong about the color correct. I might just be dead wrong, but I feel like there was a little bit of color correction to make that floor, the highlights so blue. Maybe not. Here's Rob Hardy operating with an Airy 1 gear head. A cool geared head. It's one of my favorite geared heads. And oh man, we're going to be talking about gear heads, not in this episode. It might be a couple of months from now, but we're going to be doing stuff with geared heads in a little bit, and it's going to be very cool. We have essentially a book light, and Rob Hardy talks about how he primarily likes to use tungsten, even in daylight situations. So in this case, I would guess that it's like a Maxi Brute or something like that. I've seen a couple Maxi Brutes on this show, and he's tinted it, I would think, a little bit like half CTB, that sort of thing. And the rest gets balanced out in color correction. So the key light's a little bit warm compared to the daylight, especially if it's ambient, which tends to be closer to like 10,000 Kelvin than 55. That's my guess of what's going on here. Here's a shot where he lands, and he's just left in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, keep your head down, don't get your head chopped off by the blade. So this is already kind of an odd situation. I do have B-roll of this shot. That's the main reason I pointed it out. Not a ton to go through here. As he's walking into the house, composition dance here, is that this door closes on him, and we clearly see that he is essentially in silhouette, and this door is closing on him. It's claustrophobic. It's a little bit scary. He's kind of stuck in there, and we see that this computer is essentially what's controlling him. Not only does it have a camera, it controls when the door opens and closes. Presumably, he can't open the door himself. He is stuck. This composition shows that. He's very small in the frame. The door closes over him. We saw this kind of thing in Dragon Dead 2 in the last episode where she goes in the elevator and the elevator closes and we stay on the outside looking out. It's a good technique to use for composition. Here he's walking in the scene and we see this exact shot echoed when Eva leaves. Spoiler. But he's being obscured and there's reflections of nature in the windows. And that's what I'm taking away from this, is that there's on the top half of this space, there's all this nature and these reflections. But as we go downstairs, the reflections become something else. They become something else. Here we meet our mad scientists for the first time, and they're talking with each other. And I want to call out that this feels, again, sort of like that 35 mil. I don't know the focal length. Maybe it's a 25, but this distortion here and the blooming and the amount of just softness in this lens. The f/65 with master probes on it is just sharp. You see everything, but we see this kind of haze over everything. And I think he's using Rob Hardy says that he uses the focal length not just for their width, but also for the effect they give on the scene. And what is the effect? The effect is a little bit soft. A little bit distorted. Something's a little bit off. That's what I see with these wide lenses. It's a little bit here as well, but what I think is interesting here is that it talks about his character, right? This shot is one of the first times we really see him and like we're just taking him in. Just taking in this character. So this is all production design, hair and makeup, and wardrobe. It's going to town right here. Directors need to really rely on those teams to make it happen here. Lighting is soft lighting from the window. Very frontal, but the read. What is the read of the character? The dude is on a detox. He's got a juicer. He's also got a lot of alcohol. He's got some grass. I kind of want one of these grass things for my desk. I feel like that would spruce it up. Then he's got some cappuccino or something like that, and some fruit. So a little bit of foreshadowing. He also is very sweaty and has a guest come over here, and he doesn't care. This guy just does not care. Moving on. Again, the blooming. To let the light bloom over his face like that is a decision. This light, if it's not from a window, is being added by the DP, and we're putting him in half light. And you look at this glance, we know what this is. He's like, you're freaked out. That's what he tells him. But the blooming, that's what I find interesting. The extreme shallow depth of field. He said that he shot this entire movie, except for 2 shots, at a T2.8. That's DPs. DPs remember the T-stops. They remember the T-stops. Remember your T-stops. Okay, so here's the first time we're in the basement. This is a claustrophobic looking bomb shelter place. And we immediately see that all the lighting is built into the floor. It's built into the structure. And to me, what that feels like, it can either read as high-tech like a spaceship or it's like a prison. Is my read on it. And it's interesting they have a red carpet. I never really noticed that until now. Everything's made out of cement, I guess for structural reasons, but it also means it's indestructible, meaning like you couldn't break out of it. Everything is very made out of steel, controlled by computers. It's kind of messed up. I wouldn't want to be in there. I'd rather be able to open the door. There's something a lot more inviting than... There's something more inviting about a wood door with a brass handle that you can open yourself. This does not have that. Here's them walking into the scene. I don't want to go over too much about this room. This is his bedroom. These profile shots, when these filmmakers go into this profile, it means something. I think it's like contemplative. I think there's something about, Rob Hardy says it. He says when he used to shoot 35 millimeter is that the 35 millimeter would turn someone's face into a landscape. And anytime I think of a face as a landscape, I look at this because this is like, if you flipped it, it's like mountains, right? And they go to the profile in certain situations, especially with him when he's thinking. And right now he's thinking about the NDA. And that's about it. This just reminded me of the landscape comment that Rob Hardy made himself. Now, this guy's body language and the way that he is manipulating and controlling the people around him, person, I guess, and robots, is very interesting. So he's all sweaty, presumably, kind of gross, and he's laying on his bed. This is his bed that he said he's going to be sleeping in, and he's laying all over it. So what is that doing? What is that showing? Is he marking his territory? What's going on? And then here, this body language we see again later in the film when he sits on Ava's desk. He's like, hey, you don't have to sign the NDA. It's no big deal, but I'm going to sit on this desk and look down at you. and be angry if you don't. It's basically physical bullying going on. So that is Act 1. Act 2. Act 2 is when we see the first experiment, this first session, where he is presumably there to assess Ava, to assess if she's a successful AI. That's what he tells him anyway, right? He's there to go and observe her. That break probably tells you a little bit about that. Here we see is Alex? What's the robot programmer's name? I forget right now. This is his study, where he is basically studying the robots and designing really high level, like no one in the world can handle this type of logic type stuff. And he's doing it with Post-it notes, a wall of Post-it notes. And to me, this reminds me of the fact that the director draws storyboards to conceive his movies. I see an echo of that here, that he's like, mad geniuses like us, we have to draw with pen and paper. And I kind of see that. It's interesting that despite all this technology, that he is going to organize his thoughts into Post-it notes, into this insane wall of Post-it notes. And I think it also shows a little bit of beautiful mind going on here, that it's like, you're really smart, but too smart. Bad smart. Moving on, bad smart. So here's him, triple computers. It's cool to see the sketches, the architectural sketches, and then see how the final room goes. I didn't notice that there's this kind of like ornate Baroque painting going on over here. That's cool. There's like a hole puncher over there. Interesting stuff. Triple computers. They did a good job. I have no idea what make these computers are. They don't look like Apple displays like I have. So here's the first time we see this space. This space we spend a lot of time in. We're going to be looking at, spoiler alert, in the break, this space in 3D. I'm going to be talking about the lighting a little bit more. So he walks into this space, and presumably he is there to watch Ava. But let's just get to that part. I think there's going to be time. We also look at this, and there's like this big crack in the window. Like what happened with that? Like what is it? Like someone punched it or shot it. It looks like a bullet hole. If you've ever been in places where there's bullet holes, I came from music videos. I've shot in places where there are legit bullet holes in the windows. We'll not talk about that right now. But this is the first time he sees Ava, and it's also the first time he's in this space, and there's this big bullet hole there. And when they show not the bullet hole, there's a big crack in the glass. We find out later what it's from. It's foreshadowing. So here's the first time we see Ava. This is one of my favorite shots of the movie. I believe the header, the cover photo for this is from this scene. And it puts her, there's a couple things going on here. So it puts her against this presumably nature-esque background. Though it's surrounded in concrete, there's one tree in here. And this lighting looks like daylight. Like almost like that's an open cavity to the real world, to daylight coming through there. But presumably that lighting stays like that forever because it is artificial light, but it makes it feel like it's daylight. So there's an interesting game going on there with that perception. And the other thing I wanted to talk about with her body, which is, there's a lot, I looked a lot into the CG. We're not going to talk about it at all, really, the CG replacements, but clearly this is replaced by CG. In the design with the mesh is that when you there's certain lighting and kind of like backlighting where you see through the CG body. So it's clearly a robot. So when it's in this type of lighting, she's clearly a robot. Yet when it's very soft side lighting or even soft front lighting, the mesh picks up the light from the front and it looks more opaque. It looks more like a human form. So there's interesting things happening with the light in her body. In backlight, she looks like a robot. You can see through it. In front light, she looks more like a human. We're going to look at that. And side light. Side light also looks like a human. Here's her point of view looking back at him. Really interesting textures on the glass that I didn't really pick up on. These look like server racks. Not that important. Clearly cameras, CCTVs, CC cameras. Looking at him. I like this shot for the reflection of her walking around. It's really good exposition is what this is. They're keeping her in silhouette. They're showing that she's a robot. It's showing that like he knows she's a robot. We feel like she's a robot. This skeleton-esque reflection, it's like, what is this? It's a robot. So it's the exhibition. They're setting it up. It's under blue daylight as well. This is my favorite shot of the entire movie. It's the cover. I really love it. Is it the cover? I forget. Yeah, it's the cover. It was this or one other one. I liked this one in the end. Beautiful. Just nature, this top light silhouette, the reflection seeing through the body. It's a combination of CG, art direction, and cinematography. It's beautiful. I love that shot a lot. Here, she's still in silhouette. But what I wanted to call out here, because we're going to be looking at the lighting of the room later, is that He's presumably there to watch her. But as we walk into this scene, who has the big old top light on them? He does, whereas she is in silhouette, right? So he's in a box in this room. He's in a glass box that's smaller than her box, and he has a light over him. And I think that's really interesting. I think that immediately, what I see after watching this again and understanding what's actually happening in this movie is that she is reading him. She has in her the database of all human emotion. She can read every micro emotion of every human in the world, or she has read that. So she has the light on him so she can read his micro emotions. That's really what's going on in this scene. She's being lit kind of indirectly. He's being top lit by it and she's getting the light from it. And here we start to see a little bit more of her humanness. Like if you didn't look at all this part, which is kind of terrifying, and the edge of her skin there, she looks, very pretty, big eyes. I don't know how much you guys know about this triangle, but very human and makeup on and very presentable from here. So we start to introduce her more as a human, and that's what's going on. Clearly, she starts off as a robot, perceived as a robot, but then eventually we start to see her more and more as a human, and by the end, she is basically human. So I'm gonna fly through this part. This part's not that important. It's just I have some good BTS, so I wanted to show this scene. Back outside, at the top level, little tiny bit of distortion and little bit of flaring, Whereas I don't really sense it that much down here. There's a little bit of longer lenses, less distortion on those scenes. When he's with the programmer, I forget his name, the main programmer, there's a lot of this wide lens distortion, blooming, flaring stuff happening, and I think it's to show just how unsettling this whole thing is between these two people. There's a lot of lying, a lot of deception. He knows that there's deception happening. He just doesn't know how much. And here's him. They're having a conversation. I love this beautiful lighting on concrete. I love concrete. I have some great 3D textures from Polygon, which is a new texture website that just opened up, new texture platform. And concrete is just beautiful. It's reflective at certain angles, and it's man-made and has dents in it. It's man-made because it's carved, but it's also from the earth. So it's like, it's beautiful, and I love it. It has interesting textures in it, and marble as well. Stone and light. Looks really good. I love the fact that this house is made out of that. Mostly I'm showing this because we're going to look at the lighting of it later, because I want to do some technical stuff, not all pure high level. Here they're having their first conversation, and we see the introduction of alcohol into their dynamic. Kind of similar to Dragon Tattoo, this whole social drinking thing, man. We're slaves to it. It's your undoing is the alcohol. But we love it. Here's a cool shot where we see this subtle, I don't know if it's subtle, but this scar here, and we learned that that's because he got in a car accident when he was like 14 or something, and both his parents died. And this is presumably the scar from it, and the emotional scar in here we see later. Here's the first scene where we see him start to be observing Ava, and this is let's just put this out here. Let's put this out here, guys. We have a lot of trouble with the way the technology is moving, because there were two words mentioned in this movie that should make everyone feel very uncomfortable. And this guy said it. He said porn profile. He said that later on in the movie, he's like, you designed it. This is all spoiler. I mean, hopefully it's okay. I'm jumping around for the logic. He said that he asked the guy, he was like, the guy, I wish I knew his name. He's like, you designed Ava's face based on my porn profile. Oh my God, what the hell? He's basically saying that because Alex, damn it, I forget the name of the main character, the programmer. Because he runs essentially Google, the biggest search engine in the world, he has access to all the data of how all people search for information, what they look like on their phone, who they talk to, how they behave. He has patterns of these people, so he has a profile of him. And he has his porn viewing habits. So what he's attracted to sexually, right? So this scene reminds me of a guy in his room watching porn, which is kind of what's happening. It's not like exactly, actually it kind of turns into porn later. But this scene, when I see this lighting, I can't think of anything other than porn profile. What's your porn profile? Moving on. Here's him watching Ava. He's watching her. Starting to like her. Yeah. So let's look at a little bit of BTS. Let's stop talking about the porn profiles, Matt. You're making everybody uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. all my family, if they're watching this, they're uncomfortable now, but we're moving on to something very sterile. Let's talk about jibs. There's nothing male and phallic or sexual about a jib. It's not, right? So here's that shot of the helicopter landing. This episode got weird. And you know, I think this is the GF8, right? We're really chilling this out now, cleansing the palate. I think we saw this same exact jib from Grip Factory Munich, I think, on the Hateful Eight. They're definitely shooting in Europe to be using this crane. Maybe it exists in the States. I don't typically use this one. I use a lot of Fisher 23 jibs for something like this. And it's a big arcing, start high, boom down. Also be able to do a little bit of side camera movement going on with the jib. It's good stuff, pretty stock. To be really picky, I thought the coverage of the helicopter landing was kind of messy, but maybe I should look at that a little bit again. Maybe there's something going on with the edit. I found the coverage kind of messy and disorienting. Maybe that was on purpose. I don't know. Here's some more BTS. I can't draw on this because it's like a whatever layer, smart layer. But Rob Hardy, when he says he shoots with tungsten, he means it. So there's no HMIs here. He could have easily had just an Arimax 18K. He likes the look of tungsten with CTO/CTB, color correcting tungsten. These look like maxi brutes essentially, color correcting them blue and making them daylight colored. And that's the lighting that's going into the house. This is presumably that living room area with the couches. He's pushing in soft light over here with tungsten light, which is harder to do. Honestly, it takes more work, takes more discipline. Not discipline. It just takes more work to grip it and that sort of thing. It takes more power. These are less efficient light sources. Did it get dark in here? You know what? I don't have my light on. I usually have a light on filling me in, and today is the first time I forgot to turn my light on. So I'm in silhouette a little bit, but that's okay. So we're using tungsten to fill in, and if you're used to looking at older cinematography on film, this guy clearly has that aesthetic, like Vilma Sigmund, that sort of thing. 35mm plus tungsten with blue gels or dichroic lenses, that is a very classical cinematography look that isn't done very much anymore. You know what? This is the first time I ever did it. I'm going to go turn on my light. I'll be back in 2 seconds. You guys can take a break. I'll be in 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Huh? Okay, now we got the fill light. We got the fill light going. And you might have seen something else as well. But I am going to now move on. We need to fly. I need to go faster. Here we are with some of the daylight lighting. That's what this is really going to be talking about. Oh, but I can't go to the daylight lighting without nerding out about good old Airy 1 geared head. Love it. We call it the boat. It's called the boat because it's gigantic compared to the Airy 2, which is much smaller. This one has a good flow, though. If you want to pick a geared head, you want to get into it, you should get into geared heads. We'll talk about that later. We talked about that in the beginning. Go with this one. Get that one. That's a great geared head to start learning with. If you can rent it on a Chapman Hustler. Is that a Hustler? I don't know the Chapmans that well. But outside, a lot of natural light coming in, very soft, but how do we bounce in a little bit more? We got the pizza box size, which is 2 feet by 2 feet, with a little bit of that stipple if you watched my Pantene breakdown, and now it's really bright in here. A lot of stipple bounce going on here, and presumably more like a mirror bounce going on. So bouncing a lot of natural light in. Kind of like the center reflect lighting system. Though I didn't do a breakdown of the center reflect. I did a podcast. My first podcast interview was with Christian Berger, who designed the center reflect system. We're moving on. Here we go. Here's the daylight coming through. And what I think this probably is like a big roll of diffusion being rolled out over this window. And maybe that same tungsten type tungsten light with blue on it coming through. Or it's diffusing direct sunlight. I can't tell. But this very soft light. We looked at this shot before where I nerded out about concrete. I can nerd out about anything. That's what's going on here. That's why I pulled up that shot mainly before. Looking at some B-roll. Getting some technical stuff in there. Rob Hardy says the entire movie is shot with tungsten light. Right? Didn't want to use fluorescence. Didn't want to use Kino flows. But what is this? Huh? What is that? And it's not the super blue tubes. We'll talk about the super blue tubes later. Oh, you know what? That's probably what it is. Actually, this tube, if you've never seen it before, those are likely holding KinoFlow tubes or gels. Likely they're KinoFlow tubes. He's taking out the tungsten KinoFlow tubes and he's putting in the super blue tubes. You got me, Rob Hardy. You got me. You did use mostly tungsten. We'll talk about that in a bit. Act 3. Act 3, and then one more will take us to our break. Hope you guys are liking this so far. Here we are in day 2 or session 2 or 3. I don't remember which one. And now this is the point where you start to understand that like she is very smart. He's like trying to like ask her questions like I'm testing you and like I'm so much smarter than you. And then she's like, you know what? I'm not learning anything about you because you're not answering any questions, you know? And she pulls his line on him. So we see this little bit of reversal. And we see her pacing in this. And they talk about this in the BTS, that the way the set was designed is she's kind of like a tiger pacing in a cage. She's pacing back and forth. She is much smarter than him, like infinitely smarter. But she's playing dumb to manipulate him. We don't know that yet. We see her. This angle to me of a face is always a little bit like sly. Like, is this the angle? Like, I'm trying to get it. It's like, hey, what's going on, guys? I'm sly. Like that. I feel like this angle is a little bit like she's just looking away a little bit. You just give a little bit of that eye. You see just a little bit of eye. She's being slick. That's the body language that I see. It's subjective, but I see this as like that slick look. And here we're looking up at her now. This is the first time we've started to change the horizons, right? Now we're kind of looking up at her. She's a little bit more in power. That's what it typically means when you're looking up at somebody. And she's asking him more questions, and then we're looking up at her again. And then what I'm seeing here, this is a reflection of the light source that's lighting him. When we have reflections like this, because he can have the reflections, he cannot have them, he can add them back in, he can shoot through the panes of glass. A little bit of deception here. A little bit of like covering the eyes. It's like, yeah. It's like, hey, I promise you. It's like, you promise you're going to take care of me? It's like, yeah, I promise. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit like that. So that's what's going on here. And then boom, the lights go out and they go red. And we're going to talk about this later. What's going on? The power is presumably out, and these are the backup lights. And what happens here is the light over him. Now we're going to talk about this more in 3D too, but the light that was over him, wrong slide, is off. The light over him is off, and what we see here is the reflection of the light over her. So when the light was white, we're going to look at this in 3D. When the light was white, the light was on him. So she was actually the one observing him. But now we know from watching the movie, she is causing these blackouts. She's causing the lights to go red. Now the lighting is on her. This reflection here is the light over her. And now she has the light on her. And this is presumably so that he can see her better. So the first time this has happened, really. He can see her better now, but she's manipulating. She's controlling him to do that. She's controlling this lighting. She's like, now you see me without, being observed. This is our real conversation. So there's a lot of interesting layers happening here with the lighting. And the lighting is communicating this to me. I don't think I'm breaking it down too deep. I'm not reading into it too much. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but we're going to read even into it more in 3D in a bit. So here, she's looking down. This feels like 28 days later to me. 28, I'm not going to read it out. Days later, go watch it. Up light with the red lighting here. This is still like the top light, like I said from before. We're watching her. This lighting is designed by her. She wants to be looked at this way. What does this lighting mean? What does red mean? Red can be blood. It could be hatred. It could be heart, but it could also be this. It's a little bit confusing, right? It's a little bit of heart love. That's right. I took your time to draw that heart. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Moving on. Also red, if you're from LA, I don't know if it still exists. I had a couple client dinners when I was in LA shooting commercials. There's a restaurant called Ketchup. I don't know if it's still there. You can Google it. And the lighting is no joke, looks like this. They serve ketchup for food. It's real trendy and a good place to take clients. And the lighting is all red. And what happens with red light, with the red spectrum, the light that's reflected back that is red makes everything look black. Everything looks black. It makes your food look disgusting. Ketchup, I don't know what you're doing as a restaurant. But here, my point is that red lighting makes things look very, very monochromatic. It's essentially black and white. Now, there's some blue light in there, but this is essentially black and white to me. That's what I see. Okay, so here's another shot. The power's gone off, I think, for the first time. Things are a little bit weird, right? And you see this foregrounded crack in the thing. It's like they're telling you something's going on. Oh yeah, why is there a crack in the screen? Why is the lighting red? What's going on here? It's a diversion tactic. She's changing the atmosphere of the room. The color and the light changes his mood. It disorients him so she can feed him information. If she just told him, she's like, oh hey, I don't trust the guy that made me. It would be like in the white lighting, it would be like, oh, okay, robot. But she got him out of his comfort zone with this red change. She controlled this lighting change. She's the DP of the movie. That's Ava is the DP of the movie. And then the lights go back on and she's like, yeah, and that's what we did today. You know, she's a player. She is a player. And we see her, this doe-eyed girl here, robot, is actually incredibly smart, completely playing her maker. I mean, and we start to understand that here. The baby doll eye light as well. We get a fly. Moving on. This feels like the dragon tattoo shot, doesn't it? Rich people do evil stuff. Is that kind of the theme here? Like, this is a rich person's house? It's like the same exact shot from Dragon Tattoo when you're looking at the guy's Martin's apartment or house. It's like the same exact shot here. Really beautiful practicals, backlit plexi alcohol bar, beautiful, very beautiful. But inside is this kind of menacing relationship here, where he's yelling at her and she apparently can't speak. So we don't know she's a robot yet. We kind of assume based on her body language. Apparently, both actresses in this movie were both ballerinas, so they could like do the robot. But she doesn't speak, and he's very mean. And we see that there's like a kind of hostile relationship there. Again, this is very like kind of like robotic. It's supposed to look like robotic, I think here. And even at the end when she goes like this, she kind of goes like and like turns off. Cool stuff. Love the reflection on the concrete. Love, I think these, like he said, we'll talk about a little bit later, are all tungsten. All tungsten. Tungsten plus 35 millimeter film has magic to it. That's what he says. I do believe it. And I think he's done an amazing job of making this have that magical feel that 35 looks like. And this is F65. This is the Sony F65. Shout out Sony. Shout out Sony. And wine, we see that this alcohol thing, we don't even have to talk about it. I think we all know what's going on with the alcohol here. Little reflection of him there, kind of clever. Little flare action. Not too much distortion. Tiny, tiny bit. So maybe this is like a 25 mil or something like that. I'm not sure. And I thought this frame was really interesting. We got to go fast. This is the first time, so she just got yelled at in front of him, and she goes and sits down, and she takes off her high heels. You know, and why would a robot take off her high heels? It's not. Is it uncomfortable for her? Did he because high heels are uncomfortable and kind of like, I won't go into my thoughts about high heels as far as our society and culture with making women wear high heels, but you know, they're uncomfortable, so she took them off. So she's got a little bit of humanness in her, right? I mean, we think she's a human at this point, but kind of interesting. So now we're gonna look at, before we go to our break, Pinewood. So essentially, like we said before, when they're above ground and there's nature and stuff, that's all real. So they shot in like a hotel, a hotel and some mansion that was designed by the same architect. And between the two, they were able to recreate the sets, make the feeling that that was all one house. That stuff's a real location. Everything that's underground was in Pinewood in a soundstage. And that's what we're going to look at here a little bit. Alex Garland, Rob Hardy, mini slate. Why do we have a mini slate? I don't understand that. So here's what a soundstage looks like. This is what Pinewood looks like. A lot of interesting things happening here. This looks like a camera motor. This is the gaffer / lighting director's light board, so he can control all the practicals. 7,000 tungsten practicals apparently in this set. Here's the set walls. Oh man, this is gonna be my life soon. I'm designing a plugin for production designers that automates building these kind of sets in cinema to go with Cine Designer. Won't go there yet, but essentially this is what it looks like. Very thin walls. We see a little bit of tungsten light, presumably shooting through plexiglass over here. This is a behind-the-scenes look at Pinewood Studios and from Ex Machina. Here is clearly the floor drops out because they wanted to be able to do up angles. So they have the Chapman dolly below the ground. Rob, really cool BTS. Them talking about the angle and talking about like the different options, but he's basically playing with camera height and looking up at her and catching different reflections. That's what's happening in this scene. Pretty cool. Doing a little bit of technical breakdown to cleanse the theory palette. Simple things as not seeing the crew in the reflections. You can paint them out, or you can cover yourself in black duvetine. And this guy did it to himself. He lit the set with 500 watt practicals, which are very hot, make the set very hot no matter what. And then on top of that, he had to hide under black duvetine. So you did it to yourself, Rob Hardy. You made yourself hot and you had to hide under duvetine. That's what's going on here. Cool shot again with the floor panel out. I think the floor panel's out. I don't know what this is a shot of. Kino flow in the scene, presumably only for the blue light, which we'll look at later. And a pretty cool RGB parade and vector scope. So pretty neutral here. We look at the exposures kind of low, except for these are probably pretty hot. So these are probably up here a little bit. There's a little bit down there, but essentially a dark scene, you know? And we look a little bit at the DIT station a little bit later. When the power goes out, I didn't really pick up on this in the movie, but apparently on top of like the red light source over here, which again, we're going to look at, this architecture is echoed actually in the upstairs set as well. So they did a good job of making that match. To kind of imply the blue light inside of her that's glowing, they used essentially her suit had material in it that would glow under black light, and these are black light Kinoflow tubes. So this is perhaps the only time he used Kinoflow blacklight or used Kinoflows or fluorescence, because tungsten fluorescence, I think they're spotty. You know, I think you're going to get a better effect out of blacklight. I'm sorry, blacklight fluorescents are very soft and give a nice even glow, whereas blacklight, like tungsten bulbs painted with blacklight, a little spotty. They kind of burn through. They're just not that great for it. You know, presumably everything else is tungsten. Here's another part. We look a little bit about this set. I'm not going to talk about it too much. The construction set. But I just wanted to show that, again, this is a very thin-walled set with a ceiling that's also just a very thin flat, and tungsten lights kind of shooting through the plexi parts of the scene. So that's how that stuff gets put together on set. So right now we're going to take our break, right? Remember what this means? We're going to take our break, and we're going to go into Cinema 4D. So I'm going to take my break now. This is not a tea break today. This is a grapefruit juice break. And I'll tell you why at the end. I'll tell you why. Okay, so let us now talk about the lighting design of the main interview set, or Ava's like apartment or house. That's kind of Ava's house. We'll call this Ava's house, right? Let's look at the lighting. So this is Cinema 4D, a 3D program, and in it, this camera and some of the lighting stuff is a plugin called Cinedesigner that I use and that I designed from having to communicate lighting on my jobs, and now I've made available to other filmmakers, directors, and cinematographers to communicate the lighting for their jobs. So in this case, I have recreated that set, and it's a very simplified version of it. I don't want to go exactly perfect, and what we're going to attempt to do is we're going to attempt to look at the actual lighting and how the lighting design of something like this might actually work out. But before that, let's look at the frame here. So we have our virtual camera here on a Fisher Dolly, and this is very new. No one that has Cinedesigner has this yet. Depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching it live, this is my very new setup for Cinedesigner. We'll look at it over time. But essentially, we can choose our horizon here. So this is changing the height of the camera, and the height of the camera dictates the horizon. So if we're looking up at Ava now, she's in control, right? That's essentially a way to think about the horizon. But at the same time, if we go up and we look down at her, I'm going to do it here. Nope, I'm panning. Let's look down. A little bit different perspective. So big difference in the feeling just by the camera height and simple decisions like that. So things like that can be decided here, and then they can be communicated by sending this diagram out back to your crew. They can tell what's going on. Now, we've done demos before with Cinedesigner where we just looked at the framing, but now we're going to look at lighting, and hopefully this doesn't crash. So let's make sure that this is the render camera, and now I'm going to show you a little bit of lighting. Let me check out the light board here. Okay, this is going to work out. Let's send this out. I am doing a screen record, so that is going to make this a tiny bit slower than it normally would. Let's see if this is going to work. There we go. Okay, cool. So what's happening now is that rendering usually takes a long time, but I'm using a render software called Octane. And Octane allows me to see a very quick preview of what the lighting is going to look like. So, and it does it slowly. It adds a very low res version and it slowly gets more high res. But you don't care about that necessarily, or maybe you do. But what I want to show you here is that I've designed the lighting. You'll see that there's these area lights on the floor. That's what they're called in CG. And they're lining the entire room. And that is one of the primary lighting designs of this. And that's what's allowing the characters to be uplit in a lot of ways. And then behind these wall pieces that are actually like stainless steel, I think on the set, or what are called recessed lights. This is all recessed lighting. So it's not direct. No lights are really hitting people directly. The lights are behind that stainless steel panel, and they're bouncing on the wall, and that bounce is hitting them. It's very soft. You're kind of bounce lighting the whole set in that way. And he was using tungsten bulbs, 500 watt tungsten bulbs, to do that. And this is the lighting design of that. And on top of that, I'll turn on my lighting board. There was also an overhead light. So I'm going to resend this scene out. This is definitely tough for my computer. I can tell my computer's having a hard time doing the screen record and doing this rendering, you can kind of imagine. But it's doing an admirable job. And I will say that I am not running this on a supercomputer. This is a MacBook Pro next to me with an okay video card on it, the NVIDIA card, but it's not a super high-end workstation. This kind of work and this kind of visualization can be done on a MacBook Pro. You can do it on the plane. You can do it in your hotel room. I've done so much Cine design in a hotel room to help just communicate better and better and better. It's like you get flown out to like a different country. I feel good being able to do extra pre-pro work in the hotel room, and this is my extra pre-pro work. So here's the lighting for that scene. It's the floor lighting, it's the sconce lighting here, and then there's the soft light above. And it doesn't look exactly like this. Again, this is a simplified scene. Dare I move the camera? I'm just not even going to move the camera right now. So let's look at what does the lighting look like when the power turns off. So we're going to look at that right now. So I'm going to pause this, and we're going to do a little bit of lighting change. I'm going to make the floor lights red. I'm going to turn off the wall lights. I'm going to turn off the overhead, and I'm going to resend this scene to Octane, and we're going to look at it. So this is the kind of workflow that I teach the people that buy Cine Designer. When you buy Cine Designer, you become part of the community. And we have different places that we meet up. I won't tell you what those are until you join. But if you really want to be part of Cinematography Database at this point, what I'm doing is building cinematographers, building like I'm the robot builder in this movie. I'm training cinematographers to be able to work in 3D like this. It's not that difficult. If you follow the courses that I'm putting out, the video that I put out, you're part of the community. You can ask questions to me, to the other people, to the other experts in this, and you're going to use lighting in 3D to be able to communicate things like this, right? Wouldn't this be nice to be able to communicate this to your crew? It's like, well, maybe with the director, you're like, well, what if we make the lighting green? Is that going to update? Or am I going to have to resend this? I think I'm going to have to resend it, so I'm going to resend it. What does this whole scene look like if it's green? We're going to look at that right now. There. It's going to resolve. Now it looks like X-Men a little bit, or Star Trek or something. It has a different feeling. But this is stuff that you can do pretty simply, especially if the production designer is going to help you build the set in 3D. Building sets is not too bad. I'm building plugins to make it much easier. No 3D modeling required. But this is stuff that you can do in 3D to communicate cinematography and lighting to the director, to the art team, to everybody. And this sort of stuff used to be really difficult and expensive. But now, like I said, running a MacBook Pro, Cinema 4D, and Cine Designer, this stuff is all accessible to you. So I hope this helps illustrate the overall lighting design of this. As we change the color to green, obviously a much different effect. The red works really well. And I hope that I helped illustrate using Cine Designer. I'm going to pause this. I'm going to pause it. What that lighting looks like. So we looked at the lighting that was before. That was just the floor lights with the recessed lighting behind the steel panels. And then we switched to red, where it was primarily a red light source from below. Like this one's green, and there was a little bit of red light above. Maybe I'll do that real quick over the girl. My computer's behaving really well. It's really sketchy doing screen records and running this. I think it's doing quite well. So even if it crashes now, I think we're pretty good. But this is a tiny bit more realistic. I didn't model the room that's behind her, the room with the tree in it. I wish I did. I think it would be a little bit heavy, a little bit confusing. So essentially the emergency lighting, all the lights on the floor turn red, uplight red, very ominous and scary. And then there's a little bit of top light from above, what we like we saw in the set photos. So pretty cool. I will let this resolve while we finish up. So that's our break for this. I really enjoy building, doing kind of like master studies or breaking down lighting of real movies. A couple people in my community are starting to do that as well. And it's a really cool way of trying to understand lighting is recreating real world lighting that you like from movies in 3D. Using Cine Designer. You can even reverse engineer where the Fisher dolly was, where the camera was, what focal length is. All that stuff is very accurate in Cine Designer. You can use it to both plan and communicate cinematography or to do master studies, which I think is pretty valuable. So that's our look at this break, and that's going to end our now grapefruit juice break. And the reason it's not tea is because I had oral surgery. The two words you never want to hear as an adult, but you're going to. I had oral surgery a couple days ago. Recovery is fine, but I can't drink hot liquids. So as we end this break here, is this still rendering? I'm going to pause this so no crashy. The takeaway from this tea break is three things. The first thing is brush your teeth, floss your teeth, and if you really don't want oral surgery, which nobody wants oral surgery, use Cine Designer. Huh? Okay, so let's get back to our breakdown. Enough silliness here. I gotta kind of fly. We got a lot. I need to fly and finish this up. Here again, he's looking at Ava. And this lighting, it's called porn. This is porn profile lighting to me. And this is his point. He's looking at her. He's looking at. They talk about this design of her costume. She's essentially the form of a naked woman, and he is programmed to like that. He just is evolutionary, and they play on that. This scene, I'm going to skip this whole thing because I got to get going here. What are we going to talk about in this one? Oh, yeah, very important scene. Okay, very important scene. And we have good BTS on this, too. So this is where she really starts to play him. And like I said, look at this. He has got the light on him. She is playing him. So she's got him to a point emotionally where she's like, okay, time to put the nail in the coffin. This guy needs to like me so he can break me out of here. That's what's going on. She's like, okay, close your eyes. And she goes and she puts on leggings. And what I found really telling here is that she's got these different wigs. So she could put on any hair that she wants. She could put a blonde wig on. Does this guy like blondes? There's like presumably a dark hair wig. She can choose whatever hair she wants. And she knows basically what he likes from his porn profile. Oh my God. So she's designing her look based on what he's going to like. I thought this shot was really beautiful of her face. I love this shot. I'll talk about the lighting, how this kind of stuff gets done. And she's choosing her look. And she looks at this picture. Now, is this picture something that she likes? That's what I thought at first. I thought she liked this haircut. But what I realize now is this is the haircut that he likes. He likes girls with short hair like this. Kind of like 60s or something. Like I feel like this is like I Dream of Jeannie short haircut, sort of. Also, this intersection here is probably where they go shoot the ending of the movie. Oh, spoilers. So she walks out of the scene. We're going to look at the lighting from this exact setup. Very beautiful, this face profile here. Very attractive to him. This short hair also, to him, this is what he's into. And she knows that, and she puts on this short hair wig, and she spins around, and he's like, I'm sold. I'm sold on this. I like you. What do we got to do so we can be together, right? What do we got to do? And then he goes and sees her, and she basically undresses for him. I mean, he's seen her like naked already, but it's different now that he's like kind of in love with her. He's watching her porn profile, and he watches her get undressed. So interesting stuff here. Really cool. Hopefully this feels like cinematography to you still. Talking about this high level. Let's look at some of the lighting. Cleanse the theory palette. A 4x8 diffusion panel. I've only used those in Canada, actually. I've never used a 4x8 diffusion panel in the States. Maybe they exist. I've only used them in Canada. Side lighting her, presumably. Oh, this is interesting. What is that? Is that a par bulb? I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a light or not. And then we see another angle. So that same diffusion frame is over here, and that's giving her this beautiful beauty side light. And now beauty lighting a lot of the times is very frontal, right above the camera, evens out the shape. But her face, to him, has been engineered to be attractive. So by side lighting and revealing the shape of her face, the silhouette of it, is what they want. That is attractive to him because her face is engineered to be attractive to him. So you want to side light. You want to show the curves and the shape of her face. I thought this was a cool shot on the monitor. I like shots of monitors. That's all that's going on. Again, more the same side light over here. Maybe it's a book light. It doesn't really matter. It's a 4x8 diffusion, essentially light source with a 4x floppy blocking the spill. And she walks into it. Simple stuff. And the rest of it's the ambient light. Like we said, the recessed lighting. Silver, steel panels, essentially, with light bouncing under them. And then the uplight from the floor. Very soft lighting going on here. And that shot when she first walks in to go super, super, super soft. What I think this is a 4x8 diffusion frame here, a 4x frame here, a 4x frame here of light grid, and then a bounce. So this is like 1, 2, 3, triple book light plus tungsten. It's going to look good. And especially if the light source is bigger than the thing you're shooting, it's going to wrap around in the reflections, but I won't go into that. Let's keep it moving. Now, the rest of this breakdown, if you want to check out at this point, which is fine, is going to be all theory. There's not a lot. I think we looked at the behind the scenes. I want to get through the movie now. Okay. This shot, again, it's the slick shot. When I'm seeing your glancing profile like this, we see her ear. She's listening to this scene, and it's like, oh, she's paying attention over here. But really, there's a whole conversation happening. I'm not going to go into that scene necessarily. This profile, to me, as I'm reading it now, is the slick profile. It's kind of like, can I do the angle? It's like I said, it's like, oh yeah? That's what I see here. And I like that. I want to do this shot now. I want to do this shot on something narrative and do that. Maybe you guys can do it. Send me a screenshot if you pull off that shot. What I wanted to show here, they're having a dialogue and blah, blah, blah. But I like these panels here. Because this is a real location, I believe. And the architect, they tried to match this architecture downstairs. So they built that set. And they have those vertical beams, horizontal beams downstairs. And I thought it was really smart of the production designer to match that. Here's how he talks about Jackson Pollock, basically saying that if he had to know what he was doing, he would never have made this painting, which is interesting. Here they're in the full in love sequence. So now it's just like dead center. This is the first time we see these characters dead center like this. Now it's like a Wes Anderson movie. Dead center, in love, the beautiful side light, the haircut that he likes. She's playing him. This is kind of his point of view of her. And he's talking about AI becomes human when it experiences it. It's an AI or a computer when it understands it from data, but it becomes human when it experiences it. So I think he's kind of fantasizing taking Ava out into the real world and making her human, him being responsible for that. That's what he's seeing here. And again, the in love, soft side lighting here. He's watching this all happen. And so is she. She's watching. I mean, she turns out to be the harbinger of his demise later. And the lighting turns off, and she's like, do you want to be with me? Can you help me? That sort of thing. And she's playing the injured. Again, she is stuck. He does need to help her, but she's playing it a little bit slick. I have these ones backwards. Let me quickly get to this. In this scene, he is in control. Despite him laying on the ground, despite him being higher, he is making him think that he's in control. You think you're in control, but you're not. But this blocking is really clever. They talk about how hard it was to hike up to this iceberg and block this scene. I think they nailed it. They talked about how they feel like it was a little bit hard to shoot with this kind of like flat lighting or whatnot. But he's laying down. He's being passive. He's like, hey man, I chose you because you are so smart. He's sitting. He's like, I respect you. Oh, we gotta fly. And then we look at this upshot, and he's like, yeah, you know what? I am smart. I'm gonna go save my girlfriend. Right? It's false. This is the horizon we're looking up, and I'm heroic. You get it. Moving on. Here he's in the shower, which also reminds me of a certain shot in Her, where he's in the shower. Close up of shot. I also would like to do this shot. I want to do a shot like this now. He's like rinsing off his old self. He's becoming his new self. He's resolved. Maybe he's taking a cold shower because he's thinking about certain things. We'll look at that. Here's where we see that he is definitely involved sexually with his robots. He programmed in sexuality. We see here that he is basically messing with her. We don't know what is going on. We see him tear up the sheet of paper. We learn later that this is all a setup. As he's in the shower thinking, he's picturing himself. The black and white, I believe, are dreams or thoughts. And it's basically him wanting to take Eva away and making her human and having a relationship with her. This is an interesting scene. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just not. So he gets drunk, essentially, passes out. And we see this room for the first time. And this is the room we looked at with the set designer. Really cool, multiple closets. He doesn't know what's in them yet. But what he does see is Ava, I believe. He's looking at Ava, and we get this evil shot. And there's an exact shot like this in 28 Days Later. He's brooding. He is planning something. We need to go quick here. Man, I don't know if I can finish this in the time here. Let's just go through it. So here I think it's interesting. We start to see these dirty over the shoulders where he's in the shot. Now they're in cahoots together. These are all two shots essentially here. She shows him this photo that she drew, or this drawing. And he turns off the light, and she's like, we need to be together. So she's really setting him up, and this is where he starts to plan. I'm going to skip this scene. He gets him drunk, and we have this very flary, like obscured kind of scene, really beautiful long dolly shot out. And then we see him go and presumably log onto his computer and start to hack through the system. Now, this is hilarious. This is like some master programmer at work here. First of all, this is Python, and there's some really weird stuff going on here. And they have a comment at the top called Blue Book Code Decryption. And I get this, not everyone does Python, but I do Python. My plugin is programmed in Python, and I rewrote what he wrote in there. And this is just hilarious. So this is a comment saying that he's decrypting. He's decrypting the system. I don't know what this means. They're importing system, which is legit. And then these functions they're defining is just hilarious to me. But I wanted to bring that up. That is Python they're programming, but it makes no sense at all. Moving on. A cool shot of him programming with the blue light. And I mainly wanted to show it because there's this cool BTS shot here of presumably the DIT maybe. Running OS 10. You see Red Cine, Final Cut. Just really interesting old Resolve. This is 2013 or 11 or whatever. It's old stuff. This software is super old. This OS is really old. It's really interesting technology-wise just to see that because this film feels pretty timeless to me, despite the technology being kind of ridiculous. We find out that he's had multiple robots and they've all kind of gone crazy. And then he finally goes into this room and he sees all the past robots and he sees that Kyoko, I think is her name, is a robot actually. And what I wanted to show here in this room is that this room is gorgeous. I love this room. Do I have a better shot of it? Not really. I showed it before. They talk the importance of these lights for design. Not only are they lighting the room, they're in the shot, and they just add so much to the scene. This architecture, the layout of the closets and the lights. I just think it's beautiful. I really wanted to shout that out. Really against the gun to finish this up here. Here she's staring off into the tree, which is presumably sunlight, but we see that it's artificial. She's so desires to go outside, and he put this tree in there to make her want this. This is what she desires. It's what she drew in the beginning. This is what she wants, and he put that in there so that she would want it. But we see that it's false. She wants the real thing. He did that on purpose. She's a rat in a maze, and she wants to get out to see that in the real world. Here we're in profile again. When we see him in profile, contemplation, that's all. Moving on, that's what he's thinking about. Okay, and he goes and like cuts his wrists because he's insane. He's not in a good way. Here, full on deception. Her body language, she's like a scared child in the corner, and he's like, you know what? I'm in charge. Again, looking up at him, looking at the reflection of the light source behind her. He's like, I'm in charge. I'm gonna save you. And she's like, oh, thank you for saving me. You know, like needs to be saved. Not really, not quite. She looks very vulnerable and beautiful. This is the exact image of the person that he would want to save because they engineered it. So his master plan, quote unquote, is to get him drunk again, but he knows it. He knows that that's the plan, and he tells him that. He's like, you know, I knew you were going to try to break her out, but don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. Let me show you what's going on here. But we do see that there are two robots and now they are talking to each other. She's like, who are you? They've never met before. And presumably, he's already hacked the system to make the doors open up. I know we're kind of jumping around plot-wise, but we got to finish this up here. I'm in sort of a rush. He reveals that he knows what's happened. He's known since day one that he's been trying to break her out, and he designed that. He designed it so that she would manipulate him to try to escape. And he's telling him that. And I like this looking through the monitor shot. Very cool, very blurry, like kind of sunset kind of scene here. And his gaze is completely off, which is the first time they've had a dialogue where he is completely like shown how he really feels about him. He doesn't like him. They know that. He is trying to make him not like him. Him. You know, but this is the first time we really see it. He's like, hey, why don't you even look at me? He's like, dude, not today. I'm not feeling it. And then the lights go off. He's like, and shit's about to go down. It's about to go down. Here we are in the last frames. She escapes. She gets out. Assessing the situation. I don't know what to say about this evolution of faces here. It's kind of interesting. Is this what they started with the robots? You know, it's kind of like an evolution in art here, if you know art history a bit. I love the lighting in this, just really soft. That was almost the cover for this photo, for this thing. I love it. This shot's amazing. And the knife, the sushi knife. He comes in and he gets killed. They kill him, and she's presumably going to escape. She takes his key card and moves on. We're just going to wrap it up here. There's not a ton more to say. Cool silhouette shot again. Again, this lighting shows that she's a robot. She doesn't have the wig on. She doesn't have any of that. She's a robot, you know? We see this shot. which again, it's like, oh, you're all robot-y, and your arm's broken off, you're robot-y. It's a little bit of terror going on here. It's like, I don't know if I want to save you anymore. And I think she sees that in his eyes. She's like, or he's like, oh my goodness. And it's like, she's like, oh, you're just like my creator. You're just, you're no good. I think that's what happens in that scene. She's like, she reads him. She's like, I don't trust you anymore. So she goes and steals a bunch of skin. Standard. I love this shot. This shot is beautiful as well. She gets all dressed up and she leaves him. She leaves him in there. And then the lights are red. He's doomed to die in there and starve and whatnot. And then the film ends. And I love this shot. I love this so much. This is like one of the most like beautiful things I think I've seen in a while. It's this upside down shot with this extreme 1-point perspective. And we see these shadows. It's kind of disorienting, but we see her standing. So she's presumably like looking at the sun here, right? With this kind of lighting. And the film ends, and through glass, she's looking out into the world, and she's like, looks completely human. And that is just really cool. So that's our look at Ex Machina. That's the way I like to say it. I had to rush the ending. I really love this movie, and I'm starting to realize that there's just so much. I guess I want to call this indie. It's not a mainstream. That these indie movies, and I don't know what the budget was. I think it was not high. I think they shot this in like really short, compressed timeline. Are beautiful. The limitations of independent films are good. I forget the quotes, like without limitations there is no art, or something like that. I believe that in a certain sense. With too much money, you have too many options, too many cooks, too many studios. I really like this. I really feel like this is a singular vision from the director, from the DP. The VFX that was there to serve it. It's really like beautiful in all senses, from the story to the characters to the way that it progresses the story, with the editing, and of course the lighting and the cinematography is all beautiful. And I really feel like I want to do more of these independent films. And maybe I kind of consider a P.T. Anderson kind of independent. I don't think those feel very studio, and I feel like they're very singular in their vision, and there's something strong there to take away from it. And I hope you guys like this breakdown. I'm trying to mix the high level and the technical together as much as I can. And I hope you like that look at Cinedesigner. Like that is my main passion right now, is to make that plugin and that design that workflow to be as powerful as possible, so that we can, if you're a director that has a vision like this in your head and a script, so that you, if you can't draw, you maybe don't even have the team around you, that you could use Cinedesigner to find the vision in 3D first. Do that for like a year by yourself. Really get the script right. Really design the lighting, the visuals as best as you can. And then use that to communicate with the rest of your team. They'll be able to help you. That's something that you can do on your own with your time. It won't take millions of dollars. And if you hone your image to the point where it's a script like this, you have the visuals like this in your head, you may not need all the money in the world to make it happen. But I believe that Cinedesign is part of that process for modern filmmakers, is find your vision. Find your vision in 3D first, and then communicate that to your crew, and you can execute movies like this without the big studio money, and you can have a little bit more control in it. So that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. I hope you like it. I've decided that I'm going to be announcing and hinting at the movie for next week on Instagram and on Facebook and on Twitter. So go find me, cinematographydb.com. All the links for the socials are there. Maybe they're linked in this YouTube video description, maybe not. Go find me there, follow it, and I'll give hints, mostly in the form of 3D, because I'm going to be building these scenes out in 3D more and more as we go on. Go find me online, and I'll be dropping hints for what the movies are going to be next week. I think that's the way I'm going to do it, versus just telling you at the end. I think that's not as much fun. Where's the fun in that? I will see you guys next episode. Thank you for watching. Cheers, guys.